Okay, let's let's set up Blender to have real-time shaders. Okay, and at the same time reviewing what it means, what the different textures mean, mostly diffuse, bump, and specular textures. And then in a second video we'll see how to do that in cycles and how that translates with that type of renderer. So here we have a sphere. Looking at the UV editing, we have a sphere that is very regularly unwrapped. Okay, and I want to put on my textures and I want to see them react in real time to light. So first thing, I'm going to change the renderer to Blender Game, which will allow us to have real-time shaders, a real-time shader translation of whatever material we're going to make. The problem is, to do that, we need to define the materials in the old-fashioned Blender render material panels, I think. So, well, we'll see how to do that. First, let me check something. Okay, we're back. Okay, so the material, I select the object, go into the material panel here, and for the Blender game or real-time setup, we won't be using the nodes. Okay, so it makes these two parallel systems make things a little bit confusing, but that's alright, because the alternative would be to import this object in a game engine with real-time rendering, and that would also mean learning a parallel system. So I'm going to create a new material. Here we go. And now I want to start adding textures. Now let's see what kind of textures we have for this. I have this diffuse texture, meaning that it's focusing on color. There are some, since this is from a picture, a photo, there are some topology, not surface information in there, but not too much. And what we have also is a bump. Remember what this means. It means that the very clear, very light surface, very light pixels will feel more elevated than the darker ones. So this splash of goo there will seem to stand out much more than the bricks, but the bricks themselves will have some relief, having a difference in height between the brick and the grout. And finally, the glossiness is very straightforward. We have a very bright goo and a very shiny goo and a non-shiny brick. Going back to Blender, our first texture will be the color texture, so diffuse texture. This is the texture panel, and it depends on whatever material you've selected in the material panel. By default, there are no textures in this material, and we're going to start creating new ones. So here's for the new texture. We can call it maybe color. By default, we have a generated texture called clouds, but what we want is an image, which of course now is empty. We're going to open the image, break diff. Okay, we're not seeing it, so I'm going to put texture on. Still not seeing it. Maybe I'm in Blender game. And also, okay, so the next thing would be maybe GLSL is not set up, meaning that it doesn't convert it does not convert the shader to real time. So in the rendering panel, I want to make sure that GLSL is selected. GLSL meaning that it will use real-time shaders. It will try to convert this material to a real-time shader. Now this is not the mapping I was expecting, and that's because by default textures are not mapped according to UVs, but according to some generated UVs. So going back to textures, here in the mapping submenu, I can choose coordinates. Instead of using generated, I'm going to use UV. So now it's using the ball's UVs. So this is the color, but that material doesn't have much to it. We like maybe to enhance the bump of it. So I'm going to select a new slot for a new material, create new, the same game. I'm going to go set it up in image mode, open the image, break bump. Once again, I also need to put this as to use the UVs. But you see it's not using it as a bump texture, it's using it still as a color texture. So I need to go down, a bit more down in the texture panel, and that's because these are all the things a texture can be used for, and for the moment it's being used for color. So now if I remove color, it's not being used for anything. Now I'll be using it for geometry normal. So here you can see a huge difference. We have this effect of seemingly the goo is heightened. Bump mapping method, let's do it best quality. Can't see much of a difference. Also, I can do that, but it won't change anything. Let's see what happens if I click negative. Doesn't do it. Okay, so anyways, just playing around. This is the value of the effect. It's too much right now, so let's try 0.5. Okay, that should be a bit less. Okay, maybe a bit more. Okay, that's good. But now, as you can see, the whole sphere is shiny. And I want only the goo to be shiny. So let's set up another texture. This one I'm going to name bump. And this one I'm going to name shininess. Once again, I don't want this. I want an image. Open it, break gloss. I need to put it to be mapped as UVs. Pardon me. And it should be mapped as color, but it should be mapped as specular intensity. But as you can see, it's still shiny everywhere. What's happening? What is happening is that my base material has specular to it, and so the new specular map just adds to it instead of replacing it. I'm going to put this to 0, the specular intensity of the base material to 0. Not working. Okay. Maybe this. Okay. Since this is a black and white map, what I want is Blender to use the black and white map, the RGB info to intensity info. So now we have what I was looking for: matte breaks and shiny goo, and bumped out goo, bumped out breaks. Everything's there. I'm happy. Goodbye. Hope you are too.